All right, I'm ready to get the handle scales located and the holes drilled for it. And I've taken this knife up to about a 2000 grit hand finish, and I stopped there just in case what I'm doing here puts any little blemish in the finish. I still have some hand sanding to do, but I want to go ahead and get the handle scales ready to glue on because it doesn't take long to go from here up to the finish on the blade. So I want to be ready for that. So I've gotten my jig out. The handle's going to finish right up in here somewhere, but I'm just going to grab just the least little amount of that flat. Then I'm going to go ahead and tighten these set screws down. And once again, this jig, what it does, since the tang is tapered and the blade is tapered, the only two parallel lines are the either side of that flat, so that's what we're gripping on. So when I put this on the drill press table, we're going to drill straight through these holes and into our handle scales. Real quick before we drill, I don't know if I had showed you or told you about what I had decided to do, but on these red micarta scales, I've laminated some white fiber that's going to make a nice, it'll show up a lot better when the knife is finished, but just a little thin white line on either side of the steel before we get into the micarta handle. I think it's attractive, and we'll see what you think. Okay, I've gotten everything set up, and I like it when I'm dealing with flat handle material versus something like Stag, because you have a nice regular surface. So I've got my little jack sitting there, and all that is to do is when I come down with the drill is to keep it from flexing and possibly drilling out of a line. Then you have to, if it happens too badly, then you have to make a new handle piece. But if it's just a minor thing, you have to fight your pin through, and I don't want to do either. So this is an 1/8 inch bit to match these holes. So we're going to get these drilled, and then when I'm done drilling both parts of the handle, I take a bit that's just a few thousandths over this size, and I go back through just the micarta, and that allows room for epoxy to get around and hold the pins fast. Trying to remember to keep my arm out of your face. Okay, there's 6 holes drilled, and I don't think I've ever explained on this extra hole, this hole that I drilled to use my push stick on when I taper tangs. There's a good reason I made that a 3/16. I had my original push stick had a 1/4 inch rod, and I would drill a 1/4 inch hole. Well, it just so happens that 1/4 inch is the size of hole I drill when I do a lanyard liner, which is 1/4 inch stainless tube, or I use carbon fiber tube, or just whatever. But I have mistakenly drilled that when the knife was not intended to get a lanyard hole. I did it once, and then I redesigned my push stick to take a 3/16 because that's just an odd size for a lanyard liner, and I would think when I reach for that 3/16 to drill this, live and learn. So we're going to get everything flipped around, and I come back, I'll be drilling through this one after it's flipped around and into the new one. All right, so the key thing is just making sure I have enough handle scale to overlap all the steel all the way around, because it's all going to be brought down to shape. And I'm not even worried about trimming the ends yet. That's all going to be done after I get them drilled and located. can just move up and just keep going until I get to this one. I'll just relocate this one to here and finish the holes. Okay, so what I've done is I put the two micarta scales back to back with the fiber side out, and then I pinned them together, and I just included the paper pattern in that sandwich. And I took it over to my work table on the belt sander, and I just slowly rocked it back and forth until the two scales were flush with the pattern. So now I'm pretty much done with this paper pattern, and I can take these all back apart. And I just pinned them in a couple places so I wouldn't lose any alignment. So now all I have to do is I'm going to elevate my work table, and I'm just going to bevel these just until I get a nice little slope on the end of it, and then I'll just go up to about 400 or 500 grit, and then I'll buff it. I made this block a long time ago. I just sit it on my work rest and elevate my table until I run into my platen, and it's a quick set. It's around 20 degrees. So I'm going to go do those, and then you'll get to see them when we put them on the knife. Okay, so what I did is when I got my work table elevated to the right angle, I put these face to face basically like they're going to go on the knife, and I put pins in there to keep them in line, and then I just slowly ground them, flipped it over, pushed the pins to so this would sit flat on my work table, and I just went back and forth until they formed a nice little peak, and then I just stepped up and grit, finished it about 400 grit, then walked over there and just hit them with some white rouge on a wheel, and basically that is what they're going to finish to. That's what the front of the knife is going to look like. Now don't pay any attention to any other part of the handle material, but you have to do it that way because you just can't get to that surface too easily to finish after the fact without running the risk of marring your steel that you've worked so hard to finish nicely. So I'm just going to throw these on here just loose. And this is going to lose a lot of thickness this way. But when we do get down to finished thickness, and this is just going to kind of dome, that's what's going to finish like. Of course, I've gotten dirt all over the knife now. But that's about what the finish is going to look like. And you see what that white liner does. It just kind of sets off and defines everything, and I just think it's a nice touch. It looks very kitchen-y, if you ask me, and Kim agreed. So we're going to get set to get these things in epoxy, and it's real quick then to the finish of the knife, and I'm eager to get it done. So we'll come back when we've gotten some epoxy mixed up and we're making these permanent. Okay, aside from the smudges that are on there, pretty much had this knife up to its finish polish grade. So I've got it ready for epoxy now. The only other thing I have to do, just give you a look. This is 7,000 grit. It's not a buffed finish, but it is something that's not going to take scratches so easy. If you put a hard mirror finish on a kitchen knife, and with all the things that kitchen work entails, it's not going to stay mirror polished long, and then you constantly have to run back and buff it. So it's a step down from a hard mirror finish, but it still throws a pretty nice reflection. See if you can see that. So I haven't done much to the edges of the knife at all, and I don't throughout the build. But when I get everything glued together, then that's when I work everything down basically as one unit. One of the things I'm going to do as I'm working this area is I'm going to gently break that sharp corner, just gently, just so it's not right there to cut you if you slide your finger over it. So that's an important detail. But I have to clean this with lacquer thinner really well, degrease everything, score my pins, and then we're going to go over to the rotary vise and get this thing in epoxy. And just leave it at that point until the epoxy sets up. Then we'll get our handle finished. And my little dog Mooney has come in. Hi, sweetheart. You can barely hear her. She wants me to pet her. So, all right, folks. We'll come back at the rotary vise. All right, I have everything ready. Got the tang here scored up, scuffed up, and did the same thing to the scales and the pins. Everything's been degreased with lacquer thinner. And for this color, this white color, I'm going with this Devcon 2-ton epoxy. It has about an 8-hour set time before I can start working this. So I'm just mixing it up real well. I normally use PC7, but it's a dark gray. And for this knife, I just I want to stay as close to that white color as I can. So just want to make sure you get a good even layer on the whole tang and push it down in those holes so the pins can pick it up as they pass through. And then we're actually going to roll the pins in this stuff too. Alright, now you just want to get a nice even layer on the scale too. Push it into your holes. Alright, now you just want it to squeeze out as you push it in. We'll be wiping all this excess off. Alright, so at this point I'm going to take one pin, roll it in some epoxy, find that first hole. I'll do that with another one. And just roll your pin as you go through that hole, spread that epoxy around. Now I'm just going to roll my vise over. Get the second side of the tang prepped up. Push your pins down flat. This epoxy has about a 30-minute working time. Before you can't move anything. Now you can work those first two pins up through. There we are. I'm going to drag the rest of the epoxy to the side of the cup up toward the top. Now we're just going to work the rest of the pins through. Alright, I'm going to go get some lacquer thinner on a rag, and I just want to get this excess off and have it handy for when I put my clamps on. I want to try to get as much epoxy off the surface of this so I don't glue my clamps to the handle. I learned a long time ago just to buy lacquer thinner by the gallon. Alright, now we're going to put the C-clamps on lightly. Don't want to squeeze all of our epoxy out. Just want to make sure that handle contacts through its entire length. So I'm going to put 3 clamps on here. And then we'll go back and get the squeeze out that we're going to see. As I said, you don't want to put these on too tightly, but you want to put them on tightly enough till we see epoxy start squeezing back out. And that's it. And as I've always said every time I do this, right now, this knife is probably at its very ugliest. But that changes real quick once we start getting all this excess off and start shaping that handle. It just feels better with every little thing you do. So next time you see this, I'll have it over on the grinder, knocking off this excess and getting this handle shaped up. But that is, that's how we epoxy the handles on. Does a real good job, and they're going to stay there for the lifetime of the knife.